over to tab 6, and we have some language in front of us regarding the debt exclusion, the language for the tri-county debt exclusion. And I know this was Mike King, our finance director and tax collector, is with us. Mike, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. The town's bond council has drafted language for the ballot question, and the language is very similar to that of what was approved on the ballot question back in the fall.
Kevin, do you have anything to add?
No, Mr. Chair, this has been, the language was provided by bond council, has been reviewed by town council. Both are good with it. I recommend we move forward with this language on the ballot. I know we've discussed in prior meetings, it's not ideal timing wise, but unfortunately we don't really have timing on our side. You know, as we're going to be looking at, this is really an initiative to move forward with being able to fund the obligated or committed debt that the town's going to be required to do for FY26 budget. So the timing of this, as is, you know, ideally we'll look at an approved debt exclusion, and we'll be looking at our payment, real payment, hitting in FY26. FY25 will be a small interest payment for the bond anticipation note, that will be due in FY25. Mike and I have budgeted for that as part of the assessment for Tri-County. So again, this is really for FY26 and beyond. As I've said in the past, the reasoning behind here is there is zero levy capacity to be able to handle the approved project for Tri-County under the existing levy. The town already operates with a budget structural deficit where we utilize one-time monies to balance the budget. This would be a crippling impact to town operations, which would ultimately be more like impacts to the Rentham Elementary School, as well as public safety, due to the extensive amount of the principal interest payment, you know, in the budget resources. There's no, you know, the town of Rentham's budget doesn't have gravy, if you will, and then we only have very few items that have any kind of discretionary. I say that because the KP budget is an assessment that we don't have any control over. The Tri-County budget is an area we don't have any control over, and also discretionary increases in costs such as retirement, health insurance, employee benefits, those things there's no discretion on. So that really leaves limited areas where if we do have to fund this within the budget with if a debt exclusion didn't pass, the only way to do that would be really our bigger department impacts, which I said again, which would be the Rentham Elementary School and potentially even into public safety. So kind of dire to get the word out there. I know we talked at our last meeting, trying to figure out a messaging campaign and communication. I'll be working with JGPR, the town's PR firm, working through our social media links, the town's website, working with Cable 8. Mike and I discussed today about maybe doing a recording, or just a short brief, just kind of why, with Cable 8, as well as maybe even a static fact sheet that they can run in between playings, just to get more and more people out there. Also discuss with Chief McGrath, who has the largest following through the Rentham Police Facebook. We're checking with Ethics Commission on his ability to be able to publish something, particularly because of the impact that it could potentially have with cuts to public safety. So that might be a option. I mean, typically they do allow not an advocating one way or another to necessarily support or not support, but to be able to provide just straight facts. So, you know, I think his Facebook channel is up somewhere absurd, up around like 15,000. So that's a huge following, both in town and out of town. But so I think the biggest goal for us here is going to be just trying to educate the residents who may not necessarily have a tie to Tri-County or may not necessarily see Tri-County as something that they necessarily care about, not supporting this funding mechanism. The town does not have the question of whether or not we agree or we disagree on building it has passed. The town of Rentham passed this project 80%, was the largest pass approval rate of the 11 communities. So, again, we got a limited time over the next 6 weeks, but we're going to try to work on getting a communication plan rolled out so that this ballot question can move forward. I'm happy to answer any of the questions. Mike and I have been working closely on this and, impact and, unfortunately, as I've said in prior meetings, other projects that are local projects, we're asking the question, do you want to build and are you going to pay for it? Because of the regional district and the way it had to play out, we've asked, do you want to build it? And then months later, we're going to ask, are you okay with paying for it? So it's a little bit off. A local project just wouldn't get built if the debt exclusion didn't pass. And I provide that information for the others that are listening, not for the board, because you've heard me say this many times. But that's kind of where we're, part of what the struggle is here with getting folks educated. And, we overwhelmingly have passed to build it, but months later are now asking you to pay for it, which can be a totally different conversation where we weren't able to ask it within one question or one ballot. So that's why we're in the place we're at now.
Great. Select Board Member Anderson, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
All right, Select Board Member Gallo.
The only question I have is, can we also utilize the billboards, Kevin? Don't we get certain access on the billboards that we
Yes.
have agreements with?
We do. We do have advertising time. I will work with Stephanie on what that would look like. They've been great to work with from Clear Channel and now Carroll. So we have
Yeah.
two billboard on both, on Route 1 that we do have messaging time that would run on a feed. We'll work with getting something up on there as well. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, Select Board Member Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kevin, two questions. One, can you do a reverse 911 message type of thing to the residents? And then secondly, is the bond rate locked for the whole term or is it a variable rate?
Yeah, so the project hasn't been bonded yet. They're moving forward. So FY25 will have a ban, which is a bond anticipation note. The schedule that I provided at our last meeting is kind of a ramp up schedule. So it's a little bit shorter in the first couple of years, and it's pretty steady for about 20 of those years. I think they're using I believe that schedule, Mike could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they're using like a 4.25% as an interest rate. But I think is a conservative estimate now of where from a municipal borrowing or a public borrowing. But so the answer is we don't know until they ultimately go out for the full borrowing, which will probably happen, I think, in 26 is when they look at that. So that's why in that time, that's when it kicks in for the principal and interest payment, where 25 is just the interest. Not only is it the interest, but it's a ban and it's a lot smaller amount of money. So that's why we're able to cover that 58,000 or so within the budget. Not ideal, but we can handle that.
Right, that was just the initial interest.
That's just the interest on the ban. So the
Right,
ban,
okay.
the bond anticipation note for a small amount of money just to get them ramped up. It won't be for the full amount. As that progresses and they know what the full need is, they'll then go out for borrowings. And I think, like I said, I think on that schedule that you guys saw is a 4.25% interest rate. Once they go out, then we'll be locked in on those fixed kind of escalation. So it's an escalation up, and then on the back end, I think there's a couple of tailorings off in the last few years on a 25-year borrowing. One thing, Mr. Chair, if I could just add, also for folks listening, we've talked about it as well, as the only debt exclusion the town has is King Philip. The KP debt, which is excluded debt, will roll off in FY27, but so our last payment will be FY26. So we will, as part of this messaging, we will be sharing what the estimated average impact to the average residential single, residential home as well as the commercial. But then we're also, Mike and I discussed today, is I'd like to be able to show, that's easy to do, but we haven't done a shown when the FY26 last payment for King Philip rolls off, that number will actually go down until future borrowing potentials So even though I think the average is around 155 or something for the average home residential piece. But some factor in that is would actually drop if the cost comes off for the last payment FY26 for King Philip. So that is a caveat that helps because we're rolling off about $500,000 of a payment of a debt exclusion payment every year for KP as well. So
And then the 911 reverse call, is that an option or no?
yeah, it's an option. I mean, I think that's really more of a policy discussion that that we want to have on how we want to and what we want to do that for. We do typically use we do have that afforded to us, so we have that ability to send that out as emails, text messages, phone calls, or just one or not the other. We have used it in the past as notice for town meeting, and things like that. So with this, it might be an opportunity because as you've heard, those recordings and things are short. So it might be just an awareness that, the town's local election will have a ballot question with regards to tri-county debt exclusion, and then go to the town website for additional information. So we won't be able to get into any explanation, but at least let the residents know that the debt exclusion question is going to come up on the local election, and then recommend that they go to, a particular location to find additional information. So that is an option. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Select Board Member Rouse.
No further questions on what's been discussed. Thank you.
All right. Okay, let's move on to tab 7.
Thanks, Mike.
At this time, the chair needs a motion to sign the warrant for the April 1st, 2024 annual town election.